This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello everyone and welcome back to Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast on the We Made This Podcast network. My name is Kurt North and all right dudes. Mark, how are you doing, mate? How's it been since we last spoke last week?
Hello, I'm all right. I'm still buzzing off Red Dwarf and really quite excited about the whole thing and ready and raring to go.
And joining us this week is a newbie. Is our third guest, and that would be Carl Bryan. Carl, how are you doing, mate?
I'm very well. How are you doing today?
I'm not doing too bad. We have to go through the questions, the officer's exam.
Absolutely.
That we've set up, that we've decided, or I decided, that we would do. And you've had no forewarning of this, so we do apologise, but, you know, that's the way the cookie crumbles.
We don't apologise, Kurt.
Oh,
you did it to me, and then we did it to Colin. So why are we apologising? This is just standard.
It's the thing that happens. It's the way the cookie crumbles at the end of the day.
Yeah,
you know?
So Carl, we do not apologise, just to make that clear.
Can I take the chef's exam instead?
No. Right, I am Rimmer on this occasion. I am in charge. Okay, so your first question would be, when did you discover Red Dwarf, and or if you can't remember seeing it at the beginning, what was your first memory of seeing Red Dwarf?
My first memory, it's quite clear actually. The first memory I do have of Red Dwarf is, I believe it was Justice. With Lister falling down the manhole at the very end. I just remember that speech and then that final shot of them all looking down and dropping the lid. I can't remember what year that would have been, but it must have been fairly early on. And then just sort of going from there, and then I sort of started to watch it every episode. And then the videos started to come out, and I was I think we're all probably about the same age. I'm 37, so it was sort of. I remember that series 1 and 2 didn't come out on video for a long time.
Right. Well, I'm glad you remember it, because I'm struggling. I think Mark's struggling to remember when the videos actually came out, because on my answer, it was I just remember seeing it, and I don't remember an actual episode. I just remember being on BBC Two. I personally think I was on season 3. But yeah, the VHSs has been a recurring theme in the questions that we've asked. Everyone seems to always refer back to them, which is great.
Yeah, I had all the VHSs from 1 through to 6. Because I think obviously cause there was quite a bit of a break, I think, between 6 and 7. So I had all of them. But I do remember that you could get 3 and 4. But you couldn't get 1 and 2 yet, because they've always had that thing with quality about the first 2, right up until things like the remastered and things like that. So. They didn't come out. I loved the artwork on them, though. The painted sort of VHS covers were fantastic.
They were, yeah.
Yeah, they were awesome. I remember those.
It's a shame they've not reused them for the DVDs.
Yeah, because the DVDs, they went for more of an artwork over the actual season, didn't they? So it spelt Red Dwarf. Because there's a few iterations of the DVDs actually now, isn't there? Because there's just the shows. Then there was the ones that you could buy. Pretty much
spines
with the spines in, and then obviously I think the Blu-rays have just come out recently, haven't they? So they're fairly new, and obviously we've got the Dave aspect to it now as well. So so things have changed a little bit.
I'm looking forward to seeing the Blu-rays actually, because the first couple of seasons have been remastered again. Now I watched the Body Snatcher collection back in the day, and some of it's alright, but some of it's a bit kind of. Makes you cringe, but they've been redone again, and apparently they are really quite good this time around on the Blu-ray on the Blu-rays. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I don't think I've got the Blu-rays. I know I've got the Blu-rays of the Dave stuff, but I don't think I've actually gone back and bought Blu-rays.
I don't think it's out
stuff.
until the end of this month, beginning of next month.
Ah, right. Was it October when they were thinking about doing it, or they started doing it then? I think I must have seen something and not realised that that's what they were doing. So
they came out, but they had a massive issue with the picture quality. They were printed wrong, so they pulled them and they redone them.
Right, okay.
Oh, right.
That makes more sense.
Were there any shiny new extras that we can look forward to?
From what I've seen, no. It looks like it's all the stuff from the DVDs on, but boosted up onto a better picture. But it doesn't look like there's a great deal extra. But there's still a lot. I always think that I've got the DVDs behind me now. Those DVD sets are some of the most packed for features and things. You got a whole hour and a half long documentary on each series. It's a brilliant. It was value for money, definitely.
Yeah, so that's a great memory. So question 2 would be, what would you consider to be your favourite episode?
It's probably around somewhere in 4 or 5. Because that was I thought that was a sort of peak, really. I do love Hollow Ship, just because I always enjoy the ones where other people are there, but it's not sort of monsters, it's other people. What's the Waxworld one called? It slipped my mind now. It's series 3, I think it is, 3 or 4, where he goes to the Waxworld and he wages war. I enjoyed that one, just because that was just so bizarre. But I also enjoy things like Marooned, where it's just the two of them together, and just bouncing dialogue off each other as well. So, but if you had to push me to it, I'll say Hollow Ship at the moment. I do really enjoy Hollow Ship.
No problem. Question 3 is, what would you consider to be your favourite season? And another question on top of that is, have you watched all of the episodes, including the Dave specials and the seasons that came out?
Confession time, I'm yet to watch the Dave series. However, in doing this, it's going to be a great chance for me to go back in. I watched...
What's wrong with you all?
I think, for me, it was when I saw the billboards.
Right.
And everybody look. I don't understand, and I've seen the clips of it and everybody looks fine, but in the billboards, everybody looked so haggard. Sort of like in real life, they're not as haggard looking as they did on some of these publicity pictures, which is what. And it was looking at it, and it's like, I don't know if I want to sully my memory by seeing this, but then I heard how good it was, so now I do need to watch them, and I'm looking forward to watching them, because I've heard it's good. As a favourite season, I really enjoy 8.
I'm glad you've said that, because I was starting to get a bit worried about 8, because I actually really enjoy 8 as well.
Yeah, for me, when you get to season 8, you're either going to be really stagnant or you've worked out how to twist everything on its head. And when it got to 8, I thought they'd done a fantastic job in... So, I mean, if you looked at 6, they've lost Red Dwarf. It's like, well, what are you going to do when you find it? Because is it just going to go back to how the series before were, where it's just the 4 or 5 of them on the ship? But when they got back, there was this whole new dynamic and all new characters, and the actors playing them were so good, like Graham McTavish, who was playing the warden, and people like that. It was just a really good series of. It turned it more into more of an ensemble than it already was, and I really enjoyed that series.
I think you've got a point about series stagnating, and I feel like it did stagnate with Series 7.
Yes.
It took a dip in quality in 7, but then in Series 8, it went much, much better with the new injection of new ideas. You're bang on with that, Carl.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird that with 7, they've got a bit more money, and they've decided to change it round, and the quality in content dipped. For me, there was a few good ones in 7, but I think 8 was where 7 was like a transitional series almost, and it was very lucky that they got Chris Barry back.
Yeah,
that was the big thing. But yeah.
Well, I think we've discussed in the episodes that just before these ones that we're going to talk about shortly is that how good Chris Barry is, and you just don't. It's one of those things you don't really realize it until you look at it in a bit more depth and look back on it and just think how good he is. I mean, I know, Mark, you've said a few times just how brilliant that Chris Barry is, and that's becoming a recurring theme.
He's a genius. He's just a genius. Rimmer is still not my favourite character, but I think Chris Barry is my favourite actor, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Which brings me on to the next question. That's a very good question, which is number 4, which is, who would you consider to be your favourite character, Carl?
Oh, it's got to be Rimmer, to be honest.
I can't believe we've got a full house. We've got a full house, gentlemen.
We have.
It's like Mark said, you can watch Chris Barry's performances. Even I watched the episodes again. I've watched them a couple of times in the build-up to it, but I watched it again today before we did the recording, just to sort of refresh anything and just go over it again. And there was things I've noticed for the first time now, and these are episodes from, say, 1985, I think it was. But
88
it started. 87 it started, was being made, yeah.
And there's something that I'll point it out when we get to it, but there's a few things in it when I've looked and gone, I have never noticed that he did that.
Right.
And then you've looked at him and it makes all the sense in the world, and it's fantastic. His performance and the character, and he's so wretched in these early series. He wants so badly to be in charge, but you can just see this balance of power is a very good one for just seeing there's this bizarre undercurrent of sadness going through it, and you can see it in Lister and you can see it in Rimmer, in that they're coming to terms with the fact they're alone and how they're dealing with it. And I think the way Rimmer deals with it is very interesting and very funny. Not going to get too maudlin about it.
Yeah.
But it's such and the arc that he has over all the series of what happens to him is fantastic, especially when you get into the later series.
Okay, Carl. So the reason why we jumped up with joy with that is because I asked Mark this, and Mark's response was
The cat.
the cat. I then referred back and said my favourite character was Crichton. We then asked Colin what his favourite character was, and that was Lister.
Yeah.
And you said Rimmer. So we've literally got four of us, and all of us have chosen a different character, and I think that goes to the strength of the show. That all of us can choose different characters, and all of us have, and that's by no means set up. That has just been us four having that opinion, and it's amazing how we've managed to do that.
Well, for episodes 5 and 6, we've got Matt Latham coming on. Wouldn't it be fucking perfect if he picked Holly? I mean, it could be that if he picks one of the main four, that we then have the favourite character of the crew. Either way, Holly or a definitive favourite character. I mean, it's all on Latham. Big stakes for him, but don't tell him.
No, well, we're definitely not telling him. We'll see what he says. I mean, he might turn on and say a Scudder. You just don't know, do you? So
that's true. I mean, the Scutters are ace.
Yeah.
They have some great moments in the first few series, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, so next question would be, and this is probably the hardest one that comes up, is what would you consider to be your favourite moment?
I really enjoy Polymorph with the underpants and Rimmer walking in as Crichton's trying to get his underpants off him.
Yeah.
That was a funny moment. I really enjoyed that moment.
Yeah, that's fine, and you're not alone with that. That would be my moment as well, and I think that Colin actually said that as well. There is things as no doubt we'll go through that. There's a few bits and things that I thought about after the show as well. I'm like, I didn't think of that one, or I didn't think of this one, or I just find that hilarious. And that's the one thing that I think is going to come out quite well in these reviews and these kind of recaps, because it's they're so memorable. A lot of them. I mean, that one especially. I love that scene. I just think it's absolutely ridiculous and hilarious at the same time, which is amazing. And final question for you before you can see if you've passed the exam is: would you like some toast?
Oh yes, please.
All right. Okay. So shall we go into the episode then and start talking about balance of power?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Let's do it.
Let's go for it.
Okay, so we are looking at Season 1, Episode 3, which is Balance of Power. It was aired on the 29th of February, 1988. It is the second episode to be filmed, but it was the third to be transmitted. We talked about this last week with Future Echoes and Balance of Power, so all the rest of the season's kind of a bit jumbled up here. This one is an interesting one. It's a power play between Rimmer and Lister. and it does have some interesting development in that storyline. So with it being bearing that in mind, with it being second, Carl, what are your initial first thoughts of this episode in relation to season 1? And how do you see this fitting in with the show and the themes that are already being outlaid in the first 2 episodes?
I think it's a very good episode for really hammering home the fact that they're 3 million years into deep space, and that they've got to try and find a way to pass the time. Almost, it's sort of, and this also really hammers home the bickering brother-like relationship between Rimmer and Lister, in that even though in this, I think they're probably nastier to each other in this episode than they are in a lot of the series. But again, it kind of works because it's a very early on in the series. You will be probably a lot more on edge about each other at the start, and then as the series has gone on, they've warmed to each other a lot more. But in this one, they are quite nasty in places. But it's an adjustment period. It's them trying to find their, I was going to say balance of power, but where they stand with each other in this. And obviously Rimmer's gone straight for, he's kind of finally got the thing he's always wanted, in that he's in charge, but it's the person he's in charge of doesn't care.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. Mark, what do you think of this episode then? What are your initial thoughts?
I think Carl's bang on about how they are really quite mean to each other in this episode, and they were as well in the last one, where I highlighted in the last episode how Rimmer is gleeful when he finds out that Lister's going to die. But I think it is establishing a relationship, again, like Carl said, that's kind of brotherly. My brother is my best mate in a lot of ways, but when we were kids, I was pretty shitty to him.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
And I think there really is an element of they really do care about each other, but they haven't even realised yet. And that's a very brotherly kind of relationship. I would duff up my brother, but if anyone else tried to, woe betide,
Yeah, no, I completely get that. And it's interesting that the opening scenes, again, it kind of brings in this idea of why Rimmer, because he even mentions, why bring back Rimmer? Why bring him back? Why couldn't I have Kachansky? Where you've spoken 173 words to Kachansky, and you've spoken 14 million to Rimmer. So I thought that the way that they start talking about the very beginning of this episode, it's again setting up. And it's interesting how this was supposed to be the second episode, because I could see that why the execs would want to do that as more of a, we mentioned about the sitcom element of it, the more of the human contact, whereas Future Echoes is very sci-fi, but we talked about how many layers there is in that particular episode. I don't think there's as many layers, and it's as good from that point of view. But at the same time, you can see that this why this would be a second episode rather than a third, and fits in maybe a bit more in context with that to develop the characters a bit more. The balance of power being the whole point, that by the end of it we've kind of got an idea of how things work. But the one thing I did want to mention just before we delve into a bit deeper into that relationship is we haven't mentioned the salute yet, and it happens a few times in here. What do you make of the salute, Carl, and the way that the design of the salute, and obviously the bit of mockery in this episode, isn't there, regarding it as well?
I'm sure eventually we'll talk about the books. I know why he does the 5. It's the 5 wings of the Space Corps or something that he does that for. I like the salute. I don't think it would work as an official one. You'd never take a sort of army trooping out ever again seriously if you saw them do that as the Queen went by. But it's, in terms of how it's set up, it's perfect, really, because Rimmer has a reason for it and why it looks the way it does, even though it's not really revealed in the show why he does it like that. But it's perfect for mocking. To him, it's perfect for the way it looks, for what it stands for, and for everyone else, it's absolutely brilliant, because you're just twirling your arm around in the air, you could smack yourself in the head with it.
Yeah.
It's perfect for mockery. And I've noticed in this, I don't know whether it was a deliberate thing or not, they are really belting themselves in the head when they do the mocking. Like, I don't think Craig Charles is acting when he smacks himself later on and goes, ow. I really don't think he is. He proper wallops himself. But it's a cracking salute. When we see it in later series, obviously more of an expanded joke gets made of it.
Oh, I think Red Dwarf 8, especially that scene when he's saluting Red Dwarf 8 is absolutely incredibly funny.
Yeah,
I actually do really love that.
That is a very good moment. Yeah,
it just keeps going. It just when you think it's stopped, it's like, right, that was funny, and it's like, oh, he's still doing something else, which is incredible. It's amazing. So
correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
isn't it only Rimmer who does that elaborate salute, and everyone else just salutes as normal?
Oh yeah, he made up his own salute. Yeah.
And it's wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's in the books that he keeps putting it forward to be adapted to be the official Space Corps salute, but he just gets turned down every single time.
It's total Rimmer, isn't it? So we open up with the play, this power play with the cigarettes and the fact that they're in the drive room and he's basically controlling himself. He's not allowing Lister to have what he needs. It's a Saturday. He's wanting him to work, which is interesting. They choose the actual day as well. That it's not a Monday to Friday kind of thing. It is a Saturday, and Lister just wants to break. He said it's been 4 hours. I just want to break. I just want to do it. But Rimmer's refusing him, and he has got control over him at this point. And that's an interesting power play in itself to begin the episode with, isn't it? Really,
it is. I thought it was interesting that he mentions that it's Saturday. And I don't think it really gets mentioned again at any point in the series what day it is. So it's almost like at the very beginning when they're getting used to it, they still care about what day it is. And then as the years have gone on, it doesn't really matter. It's sort of every day's the same.
I do think it's indicative of 80s culture, though, because Saturday night in the 80s was the big going out night, and through the 90s towards the thousands, that kind of became a Friday night thing. So I think if it was filmed in the 90s or the thousands, it would have been Friday night. I think it was just to emphasise that Saturday night was a part of the plot, really, because then they end up in the bar later on in the episode. So maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the bar and the flashbacks are used, because I think that they've mentioned that we've already had this discussion about the first episode and the fact that, the original plan was potentially to have quite well-known actors in the first episode, thinking that, Rimmer and Lister were just roles just to, be additional actors in there. And then all of a sudden you get, them 3 million years into deep space. And it is just them. And it's like, well, what happened to the expensive paid actors? Well, they're expensive. But obviously they couldn't afford to do that. But it is interesting that you say about the Saturday night that they're using flashbacks in this one, and they don't often do that, which is in itself is almost like just holding on, just that one extra, again, maybe a second episode trope of just wanting to ease people into this idea of this isolation element of the show, because they are going to be 3 million years into deep space. They do try and get back in Future Echoes and it doesn't work, and and they effectively are marooned, as one of the episodes, as you say, is mentioned later on in seasons. But this whole idea of them being alone in space and recalling back the Saturday and then not being referred to again, in itself, it's quite interesting because it doesn't really matter once we get into the series as a whole.
No, I mean, as well with the flashback, I believe didn't the writers say at one point that they originally had a no monsters and no robots rule?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. It rings a bell, that, because the idea of, and I quite like that. I think it would have gone too sci-fi. I think the whole situation comedy works. I know they bring other things in, but it's generally even. I don't think there's actually ever been an alien in Red Dwarf. It's always been genetically modified things and stuff, hasn't it? Really, but
that's an interesting one. Now I'm racking my brains. The Gelfs were genetically modified.
Yeah, I think it's quite good in these early series that even though they are in space and the technology's got to this point, Rimmer's still excited because he wants to meet aliens. He's still got that like almost like childhood dream. Even though I think Rimmer's supposed to be from Jupiter or somewhere like that, he's not from Earth. But I like that even though we can go into space and everything like that, it's still very practical, and we still don't know if there's actual aliens out there. But I can't think of any aliens.
I'm really struggling. Maybe there aren't
A
any.
lot of androids.
Yeah, androids and genetically modified and like AIs and stuff. But even the cat isn't technically an alien because he's sort of from Earth.
Yeah.
I'm sure anyone who's listening may be able to correct us.
Oh dear!
If we've got any listeners by now, we're 4 episodes in. Let's see how we get in. How we get into the show.
Have we upset the entire internet with our ignorance?
Probably.
People like screaming at their their phone or wherever they listen to their podcasts.
Yeah. Well, we're just here to provide a service in that way, Carl. Then, aren't we? There's a few little jokes here and stuff. The Western Saloon door in a trendy clothes shop I thought was really funny because one of my shops that I actually work for actually have those type of saloon doors.
I still think they're cool.
Yeah.
They're utterly useless. You can't... There's no privacy with a saloon door. I just... As cool as it would be to have saloon doors in your house, they're completely impractical. I still want some.
Yeah.
So just we're all around the same age, the give or take. I think we're in the 37 to 41 bracket. What do you think to the actual flashback then with the nightclub feel into it? Because I actually think in some ways it actually is quite it's quite similar to some clubs that I've been in, to be fair. But
yes.
But what do you think? What do you think to the actual kind of backstory here? The flashback with we do get to see Kachansky and he chucks the purse, for example. We see them out drinking. We've talked about last week about the fact that Lister is in the posse, that Rimmer's outside of that. He's the law-abiding one. He's the one in the corner and things. So how do you think this portrays Rimmer and Lister, and by using those flashbacks to reinforce their characters?
The fact that it's Saturday night in the flashback and Rimmer's still in uniform, technically, with his jumpsuit on, kind of shows what type of person Rimmer is. He's still working, really, even though he's off the clock. And obviously, say Lister's got, he's got the party gear on, which was very late 80s with the Hawaiian shirts and the golf visors and all that kind of thing. And it goes to show, really, because like you said, we're all about the same age and we all have that kind of memory of. I don't know if you were or if Mark was, but I was always at the sort of misfits table if I ever went out. I was never the cool person with my shoulder pads dancing on the dance floor. I'd be sat in the corner talking rubbish with my friends, and that really did sort of speak to me in that term when you see the table with Shannon, Selby, and Peterson. I didn't spit drinks in the air, but yeah, it did speak to me there that there's that table of misfits.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a real element of the tribal element of nightclubs done really well there. There's the misfit that is Rimmer, who shouldn't be there. There's the cool people on the dance floor, and then there's the weirdos in the corner. You're absolutely right. But I do feel like the bar isn't futuristic whatsoever. It looks like the kind of bar you could have gone into in the 90s. But what I did like was the bar looked pretty average and dull and normal, but I did feel like the dancing was faker than the set.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It reminded me a lot of when you see films and people are dancing and you look and go, there was no music going when they shot that. They just yelled dance and then they just filmed it.
Yeah, that was my thought exactly, Carl. Actually, I actually had that down in my notes saying that they're dancing in such a way that you could totally tell that there's nothing at all. That they're probably getting some dialogue recording as they go through it, and that's about it. And it's all going to be done in post, which is interesting. We also get in this scene as well something that gets brought up a bit later on with the learning drugs and the fact that Lister that Rimmer starts to remember the conversation, which I thought that's a typical kind of Red Dwarf trope that we get into, in much later seasons as well, isn't it? The this idea of a lot of speech repetitions. It's even happened in Future Echoes actually, where they get to say a lot in a short space of time, or the dialogue that the actors have got to learn. It's generally quite. It's very staccato from using a music term, and it's normally it's filled quite full of things they've got to talk about. And this is another case in point with him having to learn, the parts for what he's just said before that.
Yeah, I mean, with the four of them at the table, when all four of them are doing it, they're going back and forth because they're only sort of short lines like "Skive hard, play hard, that's our motto," and going around and things like that. And when Chris Barry has to do the whole thing, he's got to do all of it with some degree of emotion, but in the same breath, almost like he's trapped in it.
Yeah,
like he can't now remember anything else for the next. I was always fascinated by the learning drugs when I was younger. It's like, how long do they work for? Do they wear off? Can even like if in series 9, if someone turned around to him and said, "Can you remember that thing?" If he just snapped into just saying that whole conversation one more time and he's just never forgot it. It's an interesting. There's a lot of like some science bits that I always find, like the learning drugs, the London Jets, which get mentioned in this one, the 0G football. Like, I don't think we ever see a 0G football match, but it would have been fascinating to see one.
This is the something that always comes up in the short space of time that we've done this. But whenever somebody says something and you instantly think of something else. It's like the ZOG football. There's also the ZOG kickboxing. Instantly someone says something, you like instantly get thrown back into another episode. And that was the video games, wasn't it? The video games that he could play.
I want to go back to the drugs though. At the time, I don't even know whether this was biting satire, but when you look at the culture of young people in America taking drugs to do better in their exams. That's quite a toxic culture. I wonder if that was even a thing in the 80s, or this was a kind of Simpsons-like prediction of the future.
Do you know what? I don't know this. I've got an inkling. Weren't Doug Naylor and Rob Grant part of the Spitting Image crew? Because obviously they're very satirical in that way, aren't they? I think I'm sure that they were involved in that.
They were Spitting Image, and I think they wrote live TV as well for Jasper Carrot.
Right.
When Jasper Carrot used to do a live show every Monday night, so they must have been up against it time-wise, so that might be where it's come from.
Isn't that where they found Chris Barry as well? Didn't he do a lot of the impressions for Spitting Image?
Yes, yeah, he was doing a lot of those.
Yeah, I remember that now, yeah. And of course Spitting Image is coming back, apparently. It's on BritBox.
Yes, I don't know if either of you have ever seen this, but I went to the National Comic Museum in London. It's near the...
I've been, it's great.
It is, but they had all the Spitting Image puppets in there for an exhibition, and they had them on full mannequins with the full matching outfits to match who it was. It was eerie. Just wandering around in this, like, the John Major puppet, just sort of staring into the distance, and really quite odd, just seeing them all. But yeah, no, that's I'm interested to see what that's going to be like when that comes back, and if they get Chris Barry back on it, because he can still do a lot of impressions.
The woman who played the Queen, I did see her with her Queen puppet on one of the news stations when they announced it. I think it must have been the BBC News, that when they announced it that she was on there, and it instantly recalled me watching it, late at night on, I think it must have been BBC Two as well. That I just love Spitting Image as a kid. Probably didn't understand half of it, to be fair, but yeah, I would be keeping an eye out for that, because obviously the satire that they do with that would be really interesting, especially in these times, with everything that's going on and the last few weeks, and especially with our friend across the pond, making statements which are just downright scary. But
he's going to get a savaging on Spitting Image.
Yeah.
I think he's in for an absolute rocket, and I really hope that they have their claws out as much as they did in the 80s, because when I've watched Spitting Image back, I was surprised by how well, like Red Dwarf, I was surprised by how well it stands up, and a lot of their messages are timeless, even though they're very much in the time that they were filmed as well, and a lot of the characters, a lot of the satirical figures have moved on, but it was pretty fucking savage if you watch it back, and I really hope that they retain that.
Well, let's go to something a bit more with a bit more levity in it, because we could talk about that, and I do not want, in any circumstances, to Mark to get ideas to get how to start a podcast on Spitting Image. That's the last thing I need.
No more podcasts. No more podcasts.
12 series of it or something like that, so you'd be in it for a while, Mark.
Carl, no.
And there's 12 series of this one, but probably not as many episodes, so we're all right. So I think we have to, in this episode, we have to mention this. The first viewing of the cat with the cigarettes and the use of bribing to keep Cat on side for Rimmer, that, you know, he's wanting to do absolutely anything to stay in power, but also fish. That's all I can say.
Well, this was the thing I mentioned earlier when I was noticing things about Chris Barry's performance that I generally hadn't seen before. When he realises Cat's got the cigarettes, he sees his hands come up, and then he's kind of like looks at them slightly and kind of strains his hands because he realises he can't touch him.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And it's and he's, for a second you just see absolute fury. It's like, I can't actually stop Cat taking these cigarettes, and then obviously that's where the bribery and comes in. I think it as I was talking earlier, it's really interesting that I don't think there was any other role like that for a long time where you've got an actor who can't touch anything and can't interact with characters apart from speech. But yeah, seeing the cat and seeing these early ones as well, how catty the cat is, in that it gets mentioned in the next episode as well, where Cat will disappear for long periods of time and then just turn up, and the first thing he says when he gets back is "feed me," which, as Mark knows, if that's not a cat, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I think you're right. The cat eventually organically becomes more like the people because he spent time with them, but that's done slowly and organically over the series of Red Dwarf, and it is essentially a talking cat in this episode. And going back to why it's my favourite character, I fucking love cats. I just love cats. They are the best. My cat is looking at me with big eyes at the moment. Hello, Pasha. And I just love the character. The today's fish is trout a la creme thing. I just, whenever anyone says the word fish, I'll just, depending on who it is, if it's someone I have to be respectful to, I'll keep my gob shut. But if it's a mate, if fish is ever mentioned, I'll be like, today's fish is trout a la creme. Enjoy your meal. And even if I'm not allowed to say it in that social situation, I say it in my head.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting with cats because I'm with you. I've got a cat. I've had dogs in the past, and I've got a cat because I can't physically look after a dog, just because of the nature of my work and things. But we call him our little bastard because he is a little bastard. But he's great, and it is interesting you say about the cat element, and we get more into the cat in the next episode. So we'll probably park that just for now. But the fact that he is literally a fish, isn't he? But he's being guided. He's almost finding a second home as well. The fact that we've got Rimmer like sort of looking at him and mocking him and things, and it takes on an interesting thing really. But another aspect of Lister's character comes up next with the playing along to Rankabilly Skank, which obviously is something that keeps recurring through the series, and a typical joke which never tires, even though how many times it's ever said, is when Rimmer's looking at them in the mirror and he just goes, my eyes aren't quite working properly. What have you always had that painting? It's you. That, which I think is brilliant. So what did you make to the scene back in the bunks?
I really enjoy the bunk scenes. It's where like you say, we were talking about how they've been quite nasty to each other in these episodes. This almost seems to be like peacetime. They're just having a bit of a... They're both tired, so they're just having a bit of a chat. And this shows that, like, as Mark said, that they do care about each other and that they will have a bit of a talk about things, and then it will go straight back into being nasty to each other. But yeah, where he said, was it, I've gone video blind.
Yeah.
To me, that was the equivalent of saying, hand me my space tea. You know, you just put space in front of something to make it futuristic.
This scene establishes that Rimmer can see a reflection, whereas in other science fiction, you probably wouldn't have a hologram being able to see its reflection. I can't even remember if this is significant later on, but it's got to have been a deliberate choice to point out to the viewers that Rimmer can see himself in a mirror, right?
I never really thought about it that way.
No, I haven't actually.
I hadn't thought about it any more than Rimmer can see himself. That's unusual. And I'm just wondering, I'm thinking out loud now, is there a reason for that, or is it just for that one gag?
It's possibly for that one. Well, no, because there's other ones, like where he gets haircuts later in the series, where it's important for him to see himself, and then the build-up is that he hasn't noticed yet. That
was last episode.
It was future. Yes, it was.
Don't worry. I think we're doing this a lot. It'd be people saying, I don't know if you watch Alan Partridge, when he says, "Stop getting Bond wrong." So I think there'll be plenty of people telling us that we're getting everything wrong, which is great. You know, I love it.
Yeah, I think, because I do remember at school just having a discussion because obviously Rimmer can walk through a wall. Well, initially he can put his arm through a wall or put his arm through a table. Someone said to me, "Why doesn't he fall straight through his bunk?" It's like, it's just part of it you kind of have to accept.
Yeah, you've got to suspend belief there, haven't you? So, which is fine. When we've discussed that as well about, you know, the consistency and continuity, but it doesn't, for us, it doesn't really matter. But
oh no, I mean, and to be fair to them, with Chris Barry and with Rimmer, it's a very small percentage of suspended belief. The rest of it is like, well, no, he can't touch anything, and he doesn't touch anything. You know, I don't even remember him sitting down very often in some episodes. He's always stood up.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe it was just for the gag, because earlier in the series they walk through Rimmer, but you can't really do that without nudging the light bee. But the light bee isn't acknowledged until much later series. I can't remember who it is, but a character reaches into Rimmer and crushes his light bee to kill him.
Oh no, the first, this is me being, I know the first time is the where they go to Wax World, because he sort of tries to get out of going to the planet, and they point out, well, you've got a small physical presence.
Oh yeah,
and that's where he gets the light bee, and that's that's where it gets introduced.
Oh, so the light bee makes him able to leave the ship. Is that right?
It projects the light, doesn't it? It's almost like a spinning device that actually that creates the actual form that he's on. It's just that it's soft. It's just a soft light.
Gotcha. What I want to mention about this scene, it was never my plan, but there seems to be, in every episode, a quote that Mark still uses in the year 2020, and this episode, 3 in a row, is no different. No. I will use that a lot. If someone's taking the piss and they're asking me something they know I'm going to say no to, that I will always respond with no.
Do you know what I do? And until you've just said that, I didn't even realise that I did. But I do. I go, I don't necessarily say though. I tend to go, no. But yeah, that's probably from that. That's incredible. Have you got any tics then, Carl? Have you got anything that you generally repeat back?
I've always been surprised I never said smeghead much or anything like that. I do remember saying goit a few times, but I bet I have picked up a load and I've just not noticed.
Well, you might come across some as we go through the seasons, so we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. I bet I have. I've not picked up. I mean, that whole scene with the no and the no, it really drives home that Rimmer can just be an insufferable annoyance and love it. in the way he will torture Lister for his own amusement. It's him at his most happiest. I think you see in these early series is when he's really just needling Lister.
Again, that's the brotherly relationship, isn't it? That they really do get a lot out of taking the mickey out of each other because there's no one else to live with. They kind of make their own solace by being horrible to somebody else, and that is very much a family relationship, very much brotherly in a lot of ways, or at least me and my brother.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm talking about the characters and character traits. That it's interesting, Mark, that you said last episode about Kachansky, and that Rimmer actually says that she used to be a snooty cow towards him as well, and managed to rhyme it with scum as well. So I think it's interesting how, looking from Lister's point of view from this, that Rimmer doesn't like her full stop. She thinks she's dead snooty. Lister's head over heels about her, and again, it probably goes back to that familial thing. But Lister has a blind love of it. He's only spoken 173 words to her, and it's almost like an aspiration to get the girl kind of thing. And it's a girl that, whether or not he's able to attain or not, is a running thing through the show. But here, it's kind of intimated that he hasn't spent any time with her. He wants to spend 4 hours. He's got this idea in his head that there's more to it than there actually physically is. I don't know if that's how you took that, Carl, or not.
I think because he's quite romanticised, Lister, isn't he? He's very. Yeah. I'm going to have a donut shop and a field at sheep and a cow and breed horses. Yeah. And I think he's seen this magnificent, beautiful, intelligent woman, and he's like, I'm in love with this, love at first sight sort of thing. I think it's interesting as well that while Rimmer looks down on Lister, and Lister has the annoyance from that, when they're talking about Kachansky, you can sense that Rimmer almost has the same thing Lister has in the way Rimmer sees the way Kachansky looks at him. If you see what I mean, sort of like Lister's sort of going, well, Rimmer just looks down on me like I'm scum, whereas Rimmer thinks Kachansky looks down on him like he's scum. And a very sort of interesting sort of class. Or it could be how much of it is just Rimmer's neuroses and making it up in his own head. But yeah, Lister's got this dream. And I know over the years they kind of gently tried to tweak what their relationship was. I think it's a bit of a running joke, isn't it? Sort of how much they actually did do over the years. And it's never been made fully clear how much Lister and Kachansky actually were together, because I think it does change a few.
As far as we have seen so far, Kachansky is a massive knob. She has been nothing but mean to our main protagonists.
And flirty, sort of like a tease or teasing almost.
Although having said that though, in the actual room itself, when she's obviously being played by Rimmer, her skills in portraying Rimmer through Kachansky's body it's brilliant. The way she's playing Chris Barry, I think, actually works really, really well. Just on an acting point of view.
Yeah, it was a stroke of genius from Claire Grogan. She did really, really well there. Playing a man inside a woman's body, being really creepy and naive, I would suspect that's really hard. And she does it with real fucking style. I love that scene. Really love that scene. I've seen something you haven't, Squire. Wonderful, wonderful stuff.
She manages to get some of Chris Barry's mannerisms in there as well, with the things like mostly with the hands. When she's saying, I can't remember what it is, but she kind of, I think she says, when I'm having a woman's period, she kind of swings a hand in front of her almost to point and to emphasise it, and it's like that's a Rimmerism. And when she says "come on" and stuff like that, it looks like Rimmer, but wearing a Kachansky mask almost. It's a really good. I've always been interested to see what it would have been like if she did come back in 7 and 8. What it would have been like, but obviously that didn't happen. But she was really good, really good.
She was. But as I say, so I thought that from that point of view works really well. I think she did an amazing job there. we don't see much of Holly in this one, but when we do, a bit like Liz, I suppose Liz is romanticised, but Holly's romanticised himself, hasn't he? Because he's chosen that face. It's the best lover who has ever lived.
As a bald man, I'm glad that is the face of the greatest lover that ever lived, because it means I look more like him than not.
Until you said that, as a bald man, I hadn't thought about it, but hell yeah.
I'm in between. I'm bald. I'm starting to go balding. So yeah. So I must just be all right. Must be an average.
Well, Holly's got some hair, so you're probably closer than me or Mark.
That's true.
Yeah, and it goes back to the question that we asked Mark, well, you asked the other episode, especially with Rimmer having that extra breast. That would you like to play with yourself? And Rimmer gets a chance to, as a heterosexual man, to keep the boob up there for a bit longer.
What would I like? Would I enjoy it having a breast?
That's a lot better than what I got asked, to put it that way.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I asked him if he met himself in time, would he shag himself? Because I like to shock people.
Oh, right. Okay. Probably not. Just from my own neuroses.
I don't know whether I would have a go with a boob. Maybe out of curiosity. I haven't touched a boob since about 1997. So maybe.
Yeah, it's one of my favourite gags in the episode is the hips.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just this slightly irritated but almost not that bothered way that he turns around and sort of goes, "Are you sure these are my hips?" Like Holly's been insistent to him that those are definitely his hips. He's just never noticed he's walked that way before.
Well, I think it goes to, again, you talk about neuroses, it goes back to a little bit with, in Future Echoes, I think it's Future Echoes, where he is having his hairstyles changed. And when he realises he's got his hairstyle changed, he does kind of like take on that persona. And I think that, with him taking Kachansky's persona over, that there is remnants of him like kind of, oh yeah, I quite like this. I quite like this effeminate kind of feeling.
Sassy Rimmer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's more sass in this than I remember, actually. There's a lot of Scudder and, not necessarily in this episode, but there's a lot of Scudder sass and a lot of Holly sass as well. There's a lot of sass going on.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of jumped over Peterson's arm.
We have jumped over Peterson's arm. That should be the name of the episode. We've jumped over Peterson's arm. Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
Credit to Chris Barry. It does look, and their makeup team as well, it does look like he's got a different arm. I must admit, I remember the first time watching this when he said, "I've got Peterson's arm." I hadn't twigged who Peterson was. I don't know why, but because I don't think they really mention his name before he gets wiped out. But there is the flashback where he does mention him earlier on, but I never made the connection for some reason. Or just the odd little thing that he's Danish, which was odd, but a nice little touch. And I swear, Chris Barry punches himself full in the nuts just for the sake of performance.
Yeah.
He looks like he's proper caught himself.
And that's not a nice feeling.
No, he looks winded.
I absolutely believe it, because Chris Barry repeatedly has been the king of slapstick in these first 3 episodes, so I think he would suffer for his art and punch himself right in the pods. I think you're right.
Yeah, if he's probably turned around and gone. All they've tried to do, because I've done a bit of acting before, and I've been hit by stuff, and I know there's been we'll do it safely, and it doesn't look quite right, and I've turned around before on about the 4th one and gone, "Look, just hit me with it, will you?" Sort of, it'll hurt for like 10 minutes, but it'll look a lot better. And I've done that before, and I can imagine Chris Barry's gone, "I'm just going to hit myself in the nuts."
You're going to want it to be one take rather than many, though, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. If I can't imagine they turned around and went, "Brilliant, Chris, now do that again." He wouldn't have.
Yeah, we haven't set the camera up yet, Chris. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how, as I say, going back to that a little bit, that you mentioned Scutters before, Mark, and this is where Scutters do give Rimmer a V sign, because and the geniusness of them being in that cinema on a Saturday afternoon, and when they come back in and he walks around to the chairs and they've got a dustpan and brush between them, and then when he walks out they flick him the V sign, which I just think, it just gives them so much character. It's really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's explored in future episodes with the Scutters that they've got a love of westerns, and that's what starts here. Because I remember looking at it. I know the idea was whenever they showed something on telly, they made something so it wouldn't tie anything to a particular age. Like there's the cartoon with the gorilla that turns up in later episodes. But with this one, I was watching it and it's just this random bearded, sunglassed cowboy, and then there's like shaggy cows. I'm like, what is this film that they're watching?
Yeah, because in any other like sort of TV arena, they would probably put a film on or a TV show on that would kind of reflect what the show is doing on that episode. But with this, it is slightly different, and it is great from that point of view. We're looking. You mentioned about the chef's exam. I think that's probably where we need to go to next. Is the fact that Rimmer's attitude changes remarkably well when he realizes he's actually under threat. And Lister, we've mentioned how clever. Mark has mentioned a few times how clever Lister is in a lot of ways, and he's obviously found a way to circumnavigate the actual officer's exam and become like somebody above Rimmer by taking this chef exam. And the way that Rimmer reacts to it is really interesting. That he's under threat. He's panicking, and I really, again, from a story point of view, I think it really works.
Yeah, I mean this kind of it shows things in both of them here, and that in both when he was alive and still, Rimmer's single-mindedness was success equals officer. For him, it was officer, officer, officer. That's where you need to be. That's the ladder. And then the fact that Lister's found a way round that's not as hard has kind of undermined Rimmer's entire belief system in that, oh yeah, I could have been a chef, or something like that, and I'd have been an officer. And like, as you said there, it's something that gets this to me kind of tied into something that we'll see in future series. I think it's the Inquisitor when Lister faces himself, and he says, "You know what you could have done if you tried." And this is one of those moments where you realise Lister's head is screwed on. He just can't be bothered. Yeah. He's got the rationale. He's got the intelligence to go, right, I'm never going to be an engineering officer, but I can probably be a chef. And his mates were chefs, because I believe like Peterson and Shen were all working in the catering department. So he knows of that from other people. And he knows he could probably, when you see him do the cake later in the episode, it looks nice. It looks like this is within reach for him, and he could actually get it on merit that he's actually good at something. And that seems to have driven Rimmer a bit mad, because as we see when we have the flashback, Rimmer's like, it took him 7 weeks just to make his revision timetable, and he's used up all of his revision time.
I think there's an element of emphasis on intelligence and education are different things. You can be thick as fuck and educated, or you can be bright and have never been very good at school. So I think that this is maybe not kind of social commentary, but there is an element of emphasising that just because you haven't done well doesn't mean you're thick.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I actually, with Lister's character, I see myself in a lot of Lister in that way, because I was the one always at school that was said you were so bright, but you never really push yourself hard enough. Where I passed my exams, but I passed them, in my own like pace. Where they said you could have been like A-star student, you could have got this, and this, or whatever, or you could have been most of your grades being A to C or whatever. But it was like, well, can't really be asked. I'll revise. Like I literally on my English language exam for A level, I did a full night's revision, a bit like Rimmer would do, and and took a gamble because there was like 3 topics, and I chose one of them, and the topic that came up was the one I revised. It's just stuff like that. You know what I mean? So I was like so happy. It's just like it was like literally, one of those things where you're at the exam table, and inside I was screaming, going, yes, brilliant. But I got told, as I say, during my GCSEs, it was the same. It was, he's a really, parent teachers, nights and stuff. He's a really bright lad, but he just doesn't, put it down on paper. And that's so I see myself in Lister in that way. And I think that the characterization of all of these characters actually go a long way to, making them deep characters and not two-dimensional in any way, but actually they do have their weaknesses and their strengths, but at the same time they can conflict sometimes and can be slightly different in others. But obviously we round them off as the seasons go on, but it's there from the first 3-4 episodes, which I think is I know that they wrote the novel and they had 3 years of prep time before the episodes aired, but it's well thought out, and I think absolutely that's the way that they've done it, and it works really well.
Yeah,
I think there's a real empathy in the characters that anybody can find in a lot of ways. A lot of science fiction doesn't really get that. A lot of sitcoms focus on the laughs, but these characters, there's so much that a viewer can empathise with. Like you were just saying about cramming exams or not revising till the last day. Everybody's done that. But there's another couple of superb examples that I made in my notes about empathy with these characters. Beer during revision. Everybody that's been to university has done that. I'd kind of sat there and grinned at the idea of having a bottle of wine whilst you're doing your revision. I'll never... 20 years on, I wouldn't have admitted this at the time, but the best mark I ever got in one of my essays for university was when I got fucking smashed drinking 2 bottles of wine. And the other one that, from the shallowest of shallow characters, we're all fucking shallow. The cat says, "Oh, I've been fished to death." And we've all eaten too much food. We've all fished ourselves to death. And there's just so much that, even in a really peculiar setting, even in a very, forgive the pun, a very alien setting, there's so much to empathise with, which I think is why people grasp so much onto Red Dwarf and have such fond memories, because of the empathy with all of the characters.
He becomes an officer, and we quickly find out, actually, in Waiting for God, which is the next episode coming, that they instantly changed that, which I think is brilliant. It's like, well, he said he passed the exam, but he basically failed, and he just didn't tell him, which I thought was really nice. But is there anything else in the run up to the end of this episode that you want to pick out before we call it a day and look forward to the following next week?
Look out, food escape.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
I love that. And I think when you were talking about picking stuff up, I think I have said that before when I've not felt well. It's just, the cat's just so large in life that he doesn't go from, I feel unwell. No, he's got, I think he's got a fake stomach, hasn't he? He's
lying on the top of the bunk and you can, it's massive.
Massive stomach. Which is
he looks pregnant.
Yeah, it just goes in so well with the over-the-topness of the character that he can't just be like, oh, no, it's got to be huge. And when he jumps off the bunk, he's just like, oh, I was like, oh, yeah, it's, I've got to go do something private. I think I've said that as well before, because I just thought that was hilarious at the time. And that everybody knows what's going on, but he's like, I've got to go do something private.
I've only got one very frivolous thing that I wanted to mention, is that I'm going to look up, because my interest has been piqued, I'm going to look up whether or not Hermann Goering was a drug-crazed transvestite.
Did they edit out Nazi? I'm sure they edited out Nazi.
Did they?
In the original one, he was a drug-crazed Nazi transvestite.
There have been edits in the Netflix versions that we've been watching, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, the funeral in the first episode, it had a different song.
Yeah.
Which it was "Here We Go" in the Netflix version. But I can't. What was the song, Mark? I can't remember what the other song was.
See You Later, Alligator.
See You Later, Alligator. Yeah. So they edited that out. I think that's more of a rights issue, I would have thought, because I said the same for X-Files. That the X-Files had a similar thing where they had a song and they had to change it. So it's but it's interesting how it's still the same kind of aspect, but it's just, I didn't click onto it the first time. But it was one of those off-putting things that like that's something not right there. And it was only when we mentioned it in the podcast, it was like, I know what I mean. Have you found it? Have you found it, Mark? Or are you going to look at that after the event?
Oh no, I'm going to look it up. Maybe I'll report back next episode. Maybe we'll start with that.
Something that we did miss out on there is probably what's kind of underlined to the entire episode is when he talks about Sartre and Hell's being trapped in a room with your friends, and that really kind of plays into the whole thing because as obviously he's trapped forever with Rimmer basically.
Yeah, and
it kind of makes you go, well, they're not friends, and then also as we've realised, they're probably the best of friends as you could have. And I don't think that would have been the case if he'd been trapped with like Peterson or Selby. They'd have probably wound up killing each other.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously they kind of write that in, don't they, later on with Holly, and it was Holly's decision to do that, and whereas at the moment it's like the questions asked of Holly, why Rimmer, why not Kachansky? But I suppose it's what he needs, not what he wants, is the kind of theme, isn't it? That again, as I say, gets picked up. That will bring us to the end of the episode. Then, Mark, we have to go and talk about our favourite moment of the episode. So, what would you consider to be your favourite moment of this one? Which one would you like? Which scene would you like to pull out?
Oh, it's got to be fish. Today's fish is trout a la creme. It's got to be.
Okay, Carl.
Oh, there's quite a few. I do like the scene with the cigarettes and the cat. Just Rimmer starting at the very start of the scene. He calls him a stupid festering gimboid of a cat, and by the end of it, he's singing along and doing an impression of him, and just how he goes from complete disdain to I've got to get the cat on side as fast as possible because I need to get these cigarettes hidden. I really enjoy that scene. Just that I'll show you how to get all the fish you'll ever need. And how the cat believes that 5 fish means he's rich.
Yeah.
I do enjoy that scene.
Fantastic.
Adorable.
I think I'll go with I'm having a woman's period. Just because I just love the delivery of that line. And it's like, they wouldn't say, the way that Lister like kind of repeats back, you wouldn't say it that way. You know what I mean? It's clearly not you. But again, Claire Grogan's portrayal, I think, is incredible on that. But I also like the lines that are put in there. There's a similar theme in season 8, which I absolutely adore as well, with Crichton with regards to periods, which is a particularly fun moment. So that'll be mine. So Carl, you'll be with us next week for
I will.
Waiting for God. So thank you very much for coming on and joining us. On this intrepid journey of Red Dwarf. We'll no doubt see you then. And, as we progress through season 1, which has been a blast so far. But where can people find you online and what are you up to?
At the moment, probably the best place to find me is on Twitter at I am Mr. Carl, and it's the full MISTER and Carl with a C. I'm on there and I'm normally talking about the various little things I'm up to at the moment. I will be actually coming back with a podcast. I haven't done one on my own in years, and I'm doing one called The Loud Brain Problem, which is about when I don't know if you have this at all, I think I've talked about it to Mark, if you're lying in bed and you just go, wonder what Adam Rickett's doing these days.
Right, okay.
And
I
not being able
moments, but
No, I do a lot, and I just have those ones, and then I can't sleep until I found out what he's doing. And normally that's an hour gone. I did a pilot one, which you can find on Spotify and iTunes, which is all about the history of East 17 and how they've turned into basically a parody act of themselves. And a lot of people seem to like that. So it's quite old, but it's still up on Spotify if you look for The Loud Brain Problem. And I will be doing some more soon. I'm going to be doing one about the Gold Blend couple.
Anthony Head.
Exactly, yeah, Anthony Head. And I'm going to be doing one about when Hammer Horror came back and they decided the best thing to do is release a film on MySpace in 1-minute chunks.
Right, okay. That's going to be interesting in itself, is with the revelation of Quibi at the moment, because obviously that's relatable to that, really, isn't it? So yeah,
so that's what I'm up to at the moment, and I do the odd bit and bob here and there. So Like Mark, I'm also a quiz master, so I put things up online for that as well. So that's probably the best place to find me.
Excellent, Mark. In case somebody's decided just to watch and just listen to us talk about Balance of Power, where can people find you online?
On Twitter, it's at MarkAdamsHC. That's Mark with 1K, Adams with 1D. And the HC stands for Humanist Celebrant. So if you are interested in that element of my life, get in touch via that. I'm also the host for Life's Milestones, which is a Celebrant podcast on the We Made This podcast network, as well as Pull or Pass. That is a weekly comic book podcast as well. They are at Life's Milestones and at Pull or Pass, respectively, on Twitter.
Okay, and you can find me on Twitter at rmuldrake. That's RMULDRAKE. I'm also on the Make It So, a Star Trek Universe podcast with Tony Black, and that is at Jean-Luc Podard, as well as my other show, the Millennium TV show. We cover that, which is the Time Is Now podcast, and you can find that on Twitter at the Time Is Now pod. And I often pop up on other We Made This projects as well. But before we go, remember that we do have some clips at the end of this with what's happening on the network. So please feel free to stay back and listen to what's been happening on the network. But until next time, remember everyone.
Gosh, she's fit.
Elsewhere, We Made This. Between the notes. And you come out of that film feeling like you are terrified of everything around you.
You don't want to touch anything. I didn't want to touch anything. I didn't want to touch the door coming out of the cinema. I didn't want to touch the railing going down the stairs. I didn't want it was literally like that.
Yeah. It's astonishing. It leaves you with a real sense of, oh my God, like we are all going to die. Observing the Pattern, a Fringe podcast.
I mean, you have to. I mean, I think if you're going to build up this mysterious, mythical man, it has to be an actor with some significant presence on screen.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think getting Leonard Nimoy was a bit of a catch, because I think at this point he'd actually retired from acting, and it was Abrams that brought him out for Star Trek and brought him out for this.
Oh, there's no, you can't deny that. Even a non-fan like me, you can't deny the gravitas that he brings with him. Just having him on screen, even if it is just for like the 12 seconds that he's in this episode for.
Yeah.
I'm in a Band podcast.
Touring in Germany, though, is absolutely golden, because the venues have these, like, graffiti stickered up toilets, but the toilets are actually nice and clean.
Yeah.
You can actually go do a shit in them. You're like, do you know what? This is all right. Like, I could sit down on it as well.
No, I'm not into that, because that's kind of like putting ice cream on pizza. It's like if I walk into a toilet that looks like a shithole and then I see a beautiful, shining Armitage shanks,
It was just...
I'm going to feel a little bit pissed off. It doesn't keep
See, I'm not. Decor. I need myself a good toilet, mate. I need a good shithole, somewhere where you can sit down.
I get that.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.